In this video, let's learn about the primary key column constraint. When the primary key column constraint is applied to a column, that column is usually used as a unique identifier for the table. And usually a primary key is going to be the ID column. In this case, we can call it product ID. So typically we apply the primary key column constraint to the ID column. So let's jump into Management Studio and try to use the primary key column constraint. Let's add the product ID column, and it's going to be integer. And when we try to apply a column constraint, we can just add the column constraint after the column data type. When I say primary key here, it would enforce the uniqueness for the data in this column. And also it would enforce the not now column constraint. You can sort of say the primary key column constraint is a combination of the unique column constraint and the not now column constraint. Even though we apply the unique column constraint and the not now column constraint to the name column, the name is not the primary key. In SQL Server, when we apply the primary key to a column, in addition to the uniqueness and not now column constraint, SQL Server also create a clustered index, which improves the table's performance. Another thing is that a table can only have one primary key. You cannot apply the primary key constraint to, for example, the product ID column, and then you try to apply the same thing to the name column, and that's not allowed. By default, SQL Server can only have one primary key. Okay, let's add a comma and try to create this table here. All right, the table is created. Let's refresh the table here and then open it up. You can see product ID has a PK here, which stands for primary key. And if we go to keys, we can see that we have two keys. One is the primary key, which is applied to the product ID column. And then the other one is the unique key that is applied to the name column. Another way you can apply the primary key is at the bottom. So let's drop the table first, and then let's remove this primary key here. What we can do is add a comma at last column, and then we can say constraint, and now we can provide a primary key name. So we can start with PK and a score. We can just call it PK product. So this stands for the primary key for the products table. And then I specify the type of the constraint, which is primary key. Which column do we apply the primary key to? It is going to be the product ID column. So that's it. We can run this again. Before I run it, pay attention to the name of the primary key right here. Right, so after I execute it, and then I refresh the table, let's take a look at the columns. The columns didn't change, but let's take a look at the key. Now, the name of the key is changed to PK and score products. This time it has a better name. Right? So this is the second way to apply the primary key. Another thing I want to cover is that usually when we apply the primary key to the ID column, we make the column auto increment, which means it automatically increment the number. To do that, we specify that this column is going to be identity column, and the initial number is 1. So the first ID is 1. And then when it increments by 1. So we can do it this way. Of course, you can increment by 2 or 3, any number, or you can make the ID start at any number, for example, 100. But usually we start from 1, and every time we increment by 1. Let's drop the table again and run this create table statement. Now we have a new table and we try to edit the table. We see this product ID column here. However, if you try to type in anything, like for example 1, it doesn't go in because it's auto increment column. Let's say I add a category and a name. Now when I click out, data is going to be inserted into the table. And you can see that automatically the product ID is generated. If I add another one and click out, you can see that the second ID is generated. Now you can see the identity auto increment attribute is working. The product ID start from 1. Every time it increment by 1. Okay, that's everything I want to cover in this video. I will see you in the next one.